The fifth season is sponsored by Paul Davis Restoration, HMC Generators, Cypress Roofing, and Energy.
Hurricane Ida headed to the Louisiana coast and right now expected to make landfall as a Category 4 hurricane.
Your window of time is closing. It is rapidly closing.
In 25 years, I've never posted a more worrisome forecast.
The weather is just continuing to get more and more intense. Oh, that roof is coming. Holy!
The wind and rain have been picking up.
This is nothing like it was earlier today.
I don't think anything could show better than what I'm standing in front of.
Cherish your family. It's good to have family. We'll make it though.
Welcome to the fifth season. We've got our first alert storm team here with you as we turn our attention to hurricane season.
By this time last year, we were already tracking developments in the Atlantic. Just another reminder that it's never too early to prepare.
And we're coming off of a record-breaking year with 150-mile-per-hour sustained winds at landfall. Category 4 Ida was one of the strongest hurricanes on record to strike the state of Louisiana.
But some who experienced the worst in places like Port Fourchon feel like it was a Category 5. Here's a look at why Ida has not received that upgrade. The sounds as Ida made landfall in Port Fourchon last August almost seem like something you would expect in a Hollywood film about hurricanes.
Oh, that roof is coming. Holy!
But they were certainly real, and for most who went through the storm near the coast, it was the worst they'd ever heard or seen.
I'll tell you this, if that wasn't a Cat 5 storm, I do not want to see one. That was the worst thing I could possibly have imagined in terms of winds coming into our area.
Chet Chasson is the executive director of the Greater Lafourche Port Commission. Chasson speaks for many who went through the worst of Ida when questioning the Category 4 rating from the National Hurricane Center.
The general feeling is that the category that is currently listed as a strong Cat 4 is wrong. We believe it was a Category 5 storm.
A big part of that skepticism stems from two wind reports from ships moored at Port Fourchon. The first emerged pretty quickly, with the Secor Eagle reporting it clocked a wind gust of 172 miles per hour. And then several days after the storm, the port shared a gust that reportedly reached 228 miles per hour, later corrected to 223 miles per hour on the Laney West. A remarkable number, and if true, it would be one of the strongest gusts ever measured in a hurricane. But Dr. Jack Bevan with the National Hurricane Center, who wrote the report on Hurricane Ida and also happens to be a Baton Rouge native, says there are lingering questions about that gust.
If we took that at face value, that itself might justify the upgrade to a Category 5, but we've been unable to find out a lot of the other details about that, particularly how the anemometer was exposed and what kind of anemometer it was, and get the data so we could take a look at it in detail to see just how good and representative that report was.
While Dr. Bevan understands the debate about Ida's strength, he said ultimately his job is to make sure reports like that 223 mile per hour gust can be verified.
When we get one of these extreme wind gusts, we always want to give it a second and third look to make sure we're not getting deked out by something in the data. Like I said, if we get more information on that 223 mile per hour wind gust, we are open to going in and taking another look at it.
Even as the debate continues, Chet Chasson notes that it doesn't change what happened along the coast.
It doesn't change anything, right? We still have the damages. We still have to be resilient people and still move forward.
Be sure to check out my full interview with Dr. Bevan in my special Hurricane Week series of Coast and Climate. And you can view all the podcasts on WAFB Plus or on the Hurricane Center page on WAFB.com.
With the amount of damage that was left behind by Hurricane Ida, the World Meteorological Organization retired the name. That brings the total number of retired named storms to make landfall in Louisiana to 19.
And those record-breaking storms seem to happen more in later months of the season. Almost 2/3 of all storms that have been retired in Louisiana happened during August and September.
And it's becoming more common to see these busier hurricane seasons. I talked to some experts to find out why we're seeing this pattern. We'll be right back with that after this break.
NOAA's 2022 hurricane season outlook is out, calling for yet another active season.
But what's behind all these recent active years, and have we been down this road before?
It's becoming the norm.
You can tell these winds are just picking up.
And if it's two words I can use to describe it, that's strong and fierce.
Active hurricane seasons are almost expected these days, and for good reason. The last 6 years in a row, we've had highly active hurricane seasons in the Atlantic. In fact, going back to 2016, the Atlantic has had at least 15 named storms and at most a record-crushing 30 named storms in 2020. Have we ever seen 6 straight very active seasons or anything even close to it? The answer is a resounding no. Looking at records dating back to 1851, the Atlantic rarely had more than 2 consecutive years with 15 or more named storms, and only twice in recorded history did the Atlantic Basin have more than 3 consecutive active seasons. That is, until the year 2000, which is when everything changed. Since the year 2000, the Atlantic Basin has had 16 years of highly active hurricane seasons, meaning only a few of those years were quiet. Why have the last 20 years been so consistently active? Of course, climate change plays an important role in this recent uptick, but there are other factors at play.
So we are in an active period. We've been in active periods before. The 50s and early 60s were an active period as well. There are certain ingredients, if you will, that drive the intensity and the frequency of hurricanes. Whether we're in a La Nina cycle or an El Nino cycle, climatological effects is one of those. We are in a continuing La Nina cycle right now. Impacts on things like the temperature of the ocean in the Atlantic, which is higher right now.
Dr. Spinrad from NOAA is referring to this current La Nina pattern, one that is favorable for not only tropical storm development, but can move more systems into the Gulf. So we need the opposite pattern to quiet the hurricane season down. That would be El Nino. The last time the Atlantic had a strong El Nino pattern was back in 2015. And when was the last time the Atlantic had a quiet hurricane season? Yep, you guessed it, in 2015. The evidence is glaringly obvious when you look at the last 20 years. During this time frame, we've had only 5 years with a significant El Nino. During El Nino, we only had 20 hurricanes in the Atlantic. Compare that to the last 20 years under La Nina. Well over 100 hurricanes. That's 5 times more than during El Nino.
Let's give you kind of a unique look at Ida.
Another factor to consider, technology. The invention and use of weather satellites in space. The first HIROS satellite was launched by NASA in 1960. That means any hurricane season that took place before the 1960s may have actually had a few more named storms than recorded, because some faraway storms might have been missed.
So the bottom line here is that we've had consecutive active seasons before, but nothing like this current 6-year, soon to be 7-year stretch. One thing is for sure, we are definitely in uncharted territory.
And Jared, this year's predictions from several different groups suggest we could see anywhere from 14 to 21 named storms this season.
So here's a look at the numbers. An average season normally has 14 named storms, 7 of those as hurricanes and 3 of those as major hurricanes. This year, those numbers are higher. Now there's 3 main reasons for this. Number 1, as Jared pointed out, La Nina is back again for the 3rd consecutive year. That means a reduction in wind shear, better opportunity for storms to form. Number 2, sea surface temperatures are expected to be near normal to above normal over much of the basin for the entire season. That's the energy that'll fuel the storms. And number 3, it's not really a scientific mechanism, but it's simply the persistence. We've had 6 consecutive years above normal. It seems reasonable to believe that we'll follow it with a 7th year.
With more and more storms battering Louisiana, our electric infrastructure has taken a beating. Last year, our power grid suffered what experts called catastrophic damage. We'll be back with a look at the efforts to keep you out of the dark.
She got flooded out. She lost a car. She lost everything.
Hot lunch! We got gumbo, y'all!
You know, a person can only take so much.
We're having a lot more than other people. I'm thankful for what we have.
They're helping us to rebuild the community that we love so much.
Think about all the natural disasters our area's had to endure.
A lot of you lost power. Dimco and Energy both telling me Ida was the worst damage to their grids in the history of both power providers.
In the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Ida, utility crews went to work restoring electricity to more than 1 million customers that lost power in the state. According to Entergy Louisiana CEO Philip May, Ida caused more damage than Katrina, Delta, and Zeta combined.
Not just an unprecedented event for Entergy Louisiana, it was an unprecedented event in the history of this 100-year-old industry. Never has a company had 30,000 poles damaged from a single storm event.
Dimco, a smaller, more rural public cooperative, didn't fare much better, losing over 4,000 power poles, according to Ann Hawes, spokeswoman for Dimco. Even with the help of more than 29,000 power crews from across the country, it took weeks for power to be fully restored, frustrating many in South Louisiana.
The floodwaters have to recede before we can even get to the lines in these very rural, swampy areas to assess the damage.
Ida really threw a whole new set of challenges because of the strength, the intensity, and the scope of that storm.
Total price tag, $2.6 billion for Entergy and $65 million for Dimco. Entergy recently asked the Public Service Commission for low-interest bonds to help pay for not just Ida, but Laura, Delta, Zeta, and last winter's ice storm. Dr. Craig Green represents the local area on the Public Service Commission.
Well, the price tag is going to be somewhere around $5 billion. And if you're in a co-op, FEMA and the federal government picks up a lot of that. But if yours is an investor-owned utility, then it's on the ratepayers.
Because Entergy is a for-profit utility provider, it will use a process called securitization to pay back its debt from these storms. The money will be collected through fees attached to Entergy customers' bills.
The way we do it currently, the shareholders nor Entergy make any profit from the storm related. It's just break even is at best for them.
May says the average Entergy customer will see a $10 fee every month for the next 15 years. That's $1,800 per customer in total. Customers are just now finishing paying off Gustav and Isaac from 10 to 15 years ago. In essence, an Entergy customer will have a storm fee on their bill since Katrina in 2005 until the year 2037. As for Dimco,
we are eligible as a not-for-profit cooperative to receive FEMA reimbursement.
Hawes says Dimco believes they will be able to recover a majority of the debt. Any fees to members wouldn't occur for 1 to 2 years. It'll take strengthening the grid to help lower future costs, but that takes time and investment. The common question is, why not bury it underground? A recent study determined to bury all lines in South Louisiana would cost around $60 billion and take a decade to accomplish.
So these are the types of questions we're asking. Do we just replace the bottom 10% of poles every year? Why 10%? Why not 20%? How much is that going to cost? What kind of poles? Underground versus above ground? How old of transmission structures should we replace?
There is work that continues to go on. We rebuilt the grid, made power available, and now we're going back in and adding redundancy and resiliency to that system.
While riding out a hurricane can be dangerous, you should be aware of the dangers that linger in the wake of a storm.
With widespread power outages, we've seen a rise in heat exhaustion-related illnesses. But the Department of Health also reported more than 140 emergency calls for carbon monoxide poisoning.
Several people died last year after Hurricane Ida because their generator was pumping carbon monoxide into their homes. Make sure that generator is at least 20 feet away from your home. While it's running, you're going to want to close all nearby windows, doors, and vents to make sure none of the carbon monoxide is getting into your home. And something you can do right now to prepare, get a carbon monoxide detector. It will alert you if there's ever a buildup of carbon monoxide inside.
And as thousands of families continue to rebuild from last year's storm, some are being hit again with higher insurance rates. We'll explain what you need to know about FEMA's risk rating on flood insurance.
We heard them snap a few minutes ago. ago, so we came down to see what happened.
That's all gone. My stairs are gone. Everything I had on the deck gone.
Living hell. It's been bad.
It's pretty much demolished. Off the pilings, the whole roof is gone.
I didn't know where to even start. I mean, I must have walked 20 circles in my yard before I even touched something. It's like it's so much.
Not only are we kicking off another hurricane season today, but many Louisiana residents are trying to figure out FEMA's risk rating 2.0 flood premiums and how they're going to impact them.
So we take a look at some of the concerns and uncertainties around that new flood insurance program. Risk Rating 2.0 is FEMA's new system for pricing flood insurance. Now, FEMA claims that 2.0 better reflects the real flood risk for properties. Rather than using the flood zone approach, 2.0 examines a variety of factors to assess the flood potential. Elevation, distance from a flood source, such as rivers and bayous, the cost to restore and/or rebuild, flood mitigation efforts, and the regional rainfall and flash flood threat are some of the key elements that go into the 2.0 pricing calculation. But premium estimates from 2.0 for our area are becoming more and more alarming. Bridget Whitney and her husband Perry are longtime residents of Central. In 2021, the Whitneys' annual flood insurance premium was less than $550.
And of course, the 2.0 rating came in, and now my policy is $645 this year for that same coverage. And I'm supposed to be excited that I'm only going to be increased by 18% a year.
The Whitneys have been quoted a final 2.0 policy figure of $1,800 per year, more than 3 times their 2021 policy. Now, as long as they remain insured, their annual cost will only increase at 18% each year rather than immediately jump to that $1,800 estimate. However, at an annual increase of 18%, their annual cost will double in just 4 years.
So it's kind of scary for us. We will be on a fixed income.
What's your perspective on 2.0?
I really don't know. I'm clueless as to how they're coming up with the figures that they're coming up with.
Do you see this new rate as a punishment?
I do. I absolutely do.
2.0 has left many of us in the industry with a lot of unknowns.
Tara Smith is a realtor for Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, and she's been tracking the changes in premiums that 2.0 has produced in the local area.
We're seeing some doubling in the premiums as well as triple premiums.
In fact, Congressman Garrett Graves has seen even more drastic increases.
We've gone and gotten actual numbers from people, and I'll give you an example. We had people who had preferred risk policy, $560 a year, going to $5,000, going to $6,000 a year.
So the obvious question is, how are these new rates generated?
Only FEMA knows. I've had clients ask how they go about quoting those premiums or putting that information together and what sources they actually use to compile that information together, and it's just an unknown to us realtors.
We have, as I mentioned, been trying to force transparency upon FEMA to disclose the rates, to disclose the methodology, how they've developed this new system, and we require an independent study of their methodology to determine if it's a legitimate approach or not.
So, Congressman, what would you highlight with regard to some of your congressional action regarding FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0?
Our efforts in Congress to help to pause, delay, or flat out stop Risk Rating 2.0 is growing. The reality is, it's just not sound policy. I mean, the numbers alone scream that this isn't sound policy. We don't want to lie or mislead people in regard to the risk that they're experiencing. But the solution here isn't to charge people out of being able to live in communities. The solution is building the flood protection that they deserve.
At the end of the day, it looks like FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0 may prove to be very expensive for many South Louisiana residents.
I think that we are experiencing a disproportionate increase in rates here.
So given all the uncertainty surrounding FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0, whether you currently have flood insurance or you're thinking about adding the protection to your property, be sure to speak with an insurance expert at your first opportunity.
And that's just one thing you should be doing as part of your hurricane game plan. You want to have supplies for several days in case the power goes out or if you're cut off by floodwaters or debris.
Emergency officials say you should have at least 3 days worth of supplies. That means plenty of water and food, at least 1 gallon of water per person per day for 3 days.
You'll also want to have a battery-powered radio or hand crank radio so we can keep you informed. We have all this information and more in the Hurricane Center on the 9 News app. The 5th season continues right after this.
During severe weather, you are our eyes and ears in your part of the world.
We see the videos that you send us when severe weather strikes, and we're with you through the aftermath. And you can reach us anytime through our many social media platforms, including Facebook and Twitter.
We've also got a new streaming app for you to get your latest forecast anytime. And these are really interesting because we have more time to break down exactly what's happening with the weather and why. You can download WAFB Plus on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire Stick.
And online, our Hurricane Center has been activated on our page. This is where you can track any developments in the Atlantic and get the latest information from emergency officials.
And so from all of us here at the First Alert Storm Team, thank you for joining us and have a great evening.
The 5th season was sponsored by Paul Davis Restoration, HMC Generators, Cypress Roofing, and Energy.